I call this audit committee meeting of the Conroe Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time now is 7:34. Because a quorum is present, anyone who registered and would like to make a public comment on items posted on the committee's agenda, you are welcome to do so at this time. We've moved to, item number 1, citizen participation. Let me read that. In accordance with Board Policy BED, those who have registered prior to the meeting will be allowed to address the committee on items posted on this agenda. Ms. Godfrey, do we have anyone speaking? All right. Thank you very much. Item number 2. We will nominate and select the Audit Committee Chair for the 2025 committee. Do we have any nominations at this time?
I nominate Trustee Dungan for President or Chair. Chair.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Second.
Okay, did you get similar? Okay. Yes. All right. Let's take the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed?
I thought you were not going to vote. I thought you were going to oppose it there for a second. I thought you were like, no, I don't want it. No. You were going to get outvoted, but I just thought that maybe you were going to go
It was a win for me no matter.
Yeah, right. You were
All right.
stuck one way or the other, right?
Good deal. Motion carries. All right. We'll just keep moving right along. Thank you. All right, item number 3, we're going to receive the annual comprehensive financial report by Sarah Roberts with the Weaver LLP and consider and approve the recommendation of the district's 2024 annual comprehensive financial report to be presented to the Board of Trustees at the next regular meeting of the board. Good morning, Ms.
All right.
Roberts.
I think we're going to have
Ms.
an
Garza?
intro from Mrs. Garza.
Well, good morning, Chairman Dungan, members of the Audit Committee, and Dr. Null. It is my pleasure to be here this morning to provide you with the results of the 2023-2024 annual financial statement audit and an overview of the annual comprehensive financial report, also known as the ACFR. Board Policy CFA Legal requires that a copy of the ACFR approved by the Board of Trustees be submitted to the Texas Education Agency no later than 150 days after the end of the fiscal year. That puts our due date of January 28th of 2025. After the presentation this morning and questions and discussion, we will be asking the Audit Committee for their recommendation of approval of the ACFR to the full Board of Trustees to be considered at next week's regular board meeting. Sarah Roberts, our partner with our independent audit firm Weaver, is here this morning to provide you with a presentation of the results of the audit and an overview of the ACFR. Before I introduce Sarah this morning, I'd like to recognize our finance staff that are here this morning. This really is a culmination of months of work. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into the preparation of this document, and this group behind me has done a tremendous job in putting this document together. We started this process back in July, and when we started the audit, many late nights this fall putting this document together. As you can see, it's a very detailed document, lots of information in here. And so I just want to recognize this team for their efforts. We work with a very small group in putting this document together every year, and I'm so proud of the work that they have done. So I wanted to recognize Cindy Westrup, our Director of Finance, our 2 Assistant Directors, Janice Stowers and Desiree Smith, and then our Senior Accountant, Rachel Battaglia, and then our 2 Staff Accountants, Blair De La Houssaye and Candace Armstrong, for their work in the preparation of this document. Without further ado, I'll introduce Sarah Roberts, our partner with Weaver.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy to be here today. Thank you for including me on your agenda. I've structured my presentation today with 3 sections. First, I'm going to give you some information about Weaver as a firm. I know we have some new audit committee members, some of you familiar faces, but others I thought might be helpful to just talk about who we are, what we do. And then second, I'm going to talk about the district's audit, including the audit standards and the audit results. And then third, I'll give a brief high-level overview of the financial statements, the ACFR, as Karen described it. Of course, I believe you all have a copy of it, either a hard copy or electronic. You can see it's a lengthy document, so we're not going to go through all of it, but we'll touch on the high points. Happy to take questions at any time. So this is Weaver at a glance. This is what we do. We are a firm that was founded in 1950 in Fort Worth. Our headquarters now is Houston. So we're Texas-based. Our roots are in Texas. We've expanded nationally. You can see here our office is coast to coast, but our roots remain in Texas, and we consider ourselves a Texas firm. We provide a full-service spectrum of public accounting services, including audit, tax, advisory, consulting, branching out into forensics and even energy compliance and other areas that are more niche-based. We're consistently ranked in the top 40 accounting firms in terms of size, measured by both revenues and number of CPAs we have on staff. We're currently ranked number 31 or number 32 in terms of size, depending on what publication you look at. We are driven by our core values. So I talk about what we do. I also like to talk about who we are. We have 8 core values that we consider our guiding principles. The one that really underpins them all is the one that you can see printed on the coffee mug on our slide: act with integrity no matter what. Integrity is key to everything we do as auditors and as a firm. And we use these guiding principles to drive our culture in terms of how we interact with each other and how we treat each other and our employees and our workplace culture, and also with our clients. So I mentioned we're a full-service public accounting firm. We work with clients in all industries, in particular the governmental industry. We provide a full range of services. Of course, we're here today to talk about the external audit. We have specialist groups that provide other services, including valuation, forensics, cybersecurity, risk advisory, and other things along that nature. We currently work with more than 50 school districts in Texas. More than 40 of those are audit clients. So we have a handful of governmental Texas school district clients that we provide advisory services to, but maybe not the actual audit. Overall, we have about a little over 100 governmental clients that we work with annually. So about half of those are school districts. Here's a sampling of our clients, our governmental clients. We have governmental clients coast to coast. Our audit practice is really concentrated in Texas. I, of course, couldn't list all of our Texas clients, but I've included here some of our largest clients. You can see concentrated mostly around the major metropolitan areas, but really spread throughout the state. Speaking of our Texas school district client base, here are some metrics or stats. We work with school districts of all shapes and sizes, from the very largest, over 200,000 ADA, which of course would be HISD, that's the largest school district in the state, down to the smallest school districts. We have 2 or 3 clients that are under 1,000 ADA. We work with currently 6 of the 10 largest school districts in Texas, and our audit tenure ranges from less than a year, we have new clients, to over 40 years. Our longest tenured clients are going to be in the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area, because that's where we were founded. We've been there the longest, and so we have the longest tenured clients there. Our average tenure is about 16 years, which is about consistent with how long we've been working with Conroe ISD. Our first year doing the external audit was fiscal year 2008. So we're proud to have a long-standing relationship, and we value our clients from our newest to our most familiar. And we make a commitment to all of our clients that we'll bring to you a team of professionals that has the highest level of competence to work on your audit, and of course demonstrates our core values as a firm, including that commitment to integrity that really underpins everything we do as professionals and as CPAs. So that's Weaver at a glance. That's some information about us. My next topic is to talk about the audit. I thought I would pause for a moment. If you have any questions, happy to address them.
Anyone have questions?
Okay. Moving on then. So the Conroe ISD fiscal year 2024 audit, I've included here a timeline of the audit, and if it's not really a line, it's a circle, it's a cycle. So we have milestones, we have dates. We are, of course, here today for the audit committee meeting, next week for the board meeting. We have times that we're out here. Our team is here in the field. Those are our fieldwork times. We spend some time in July and August setting the groundwork for our audit. That's before the end of the fiscal year, and then once the fiscal year closes, we come back out and spend some time here doing our final fieldwork phase. That was November and December. Outside of these phases and these milestones, we stay in touch. We talk about new accounting standards. We talk about developments or concerns or plans for next year, so that it's really a continuous cycle of communication and planning. I've also included here our core audit team. Myself, I'm the engagement partner. I'm responsible for the overall conduct of the audit. I have working with me a quality control partner. This year it was Laura Lambert. She's actually the partner in charge of our National Audit and Advisory Office, our national office function. She served as a quality control partner this year and last year. We rotate this role pretty frequently, so next year it may be somebody else. But that's our quality control partner who reviews, who's available basically as kind of, tangential to the core engagement team. She's available for technical consultation and questions, and then reviews our audit when we're in our concluding phases, reviews our documentation and our reports, and ensures that we're adhering to our system of quality management and all applicable audit standards. I've been the engagement partner for Conroe ISD since 2017. I have Brittany Drew, senior manager. On this engagement, she's been the senior manager since 2022. So this was her 2022, 23, 24, third year. Katie Miller, our engagement supervisor, has been involved in the engagement since 2020. And she started out as a senior associate, and she's moved up to supervisor. Next step, she'll be, within the next couple of years, she'll move into a manager role, and so Brittany or Katie, we'll see who continues. Jacob Meckler, engagement associate, he just started with Weaver this summer, so this was his first year. We had a couple other audit associates and specialist team members that assisted throughout the audit, but this was the core dedicated team that if you were here walking the halls any of the days that we were here, this is who you would have seen. We have subject matter resources. I mentioned that at Weaver we have specialist teams and groups that specialize in areas outside of external audit. We call on them as needed. I've included a couple of them here. We typically involve our IT consulting and data analytics groups in the majority of our school district audits. Rima and her team and Elisa and her team assist us greatly in those areas. And then we call on other resources as needed. The type of audit that we perform for Conroe ISD is what's known as a single audit. There's two components to this audit. There's an audit of the financial statements and there's an audit of federal awards compliance. There are different audit standards that are applicable to each area. Financial statement audits are performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. This is commonly abbreviated GAS, and generally accepted government auditing standards, which is commonly abbreviated GAGAS. These are also known as the Yellow Book standards. We have a lot of acronyms in the accounting and auditing world, so it's, sometimes they sound kind of funny, but it's part of our lingo. This audit includes tests of the district's compliance with contracts, grant agreements, laws, and regulations that could impact the financial statements. So we perform tests of the district's compliance with compliance requirements such as the PFIA, Public Funds Investment Act, also Texas procurement rules, and the TEA's compliance requirements. The audit of federal awards is performed in accordance with the Uniform Guidance, which is the Single Audit Act and related amendments issued by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. Those standards require that we issue 3 reports. The first 2 reports pertain to the financial statements, one of which is our opinion on the financial statements. We express an opinion on whether we consider the financial statements to be fairly presented in accordance with all applicable accounting principles. This is where we would have our clean opinion, if you might be familiar with that term. We talk about a clean opinion on the financial statements. We issue our Yellow Book report, which is our government auditing standards report that describes the scope of our testing of internal controls and compliance relevant to the financial statements. In this report, we would include any findings of control deficiencies or material weaknesses or anything of that nature. Lastly, we issue our report specific to the federal awards component, which is our report on compliance, where we issue an opinion on compliance, and we also describe the scope of our testing of internal controls over compliance. So with that, I'll get into the results. On the first part, the financial statements, the type of report that we issued was an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is that clean opinion. So we expressed a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls. If we identified any such items, we would be required to include them in our report and report them to you. We also did not identify any non-compliance that's material to the financial statements. The second component, the federal award component, we issue a report that includes similar items. We issued an unmodified opinion on compliance for federal award major programs. That's a clean opinion. And similarly, we did not identify any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies in internal controls over compliance that we would be required to report. There are other types of audit findings that if we identified them, we would be required to report, which includes any findings of fraud, known or likely questioned costs relevant to a major program, or known or likely questioned costs that are relevant to a non-major program. Any of these types of items, we would be required to report them. Our major program this year, for purposes of the federal awards audit, was the child nutrition program. Total expenditures of the child nutrition program were $22 million. That's about 32% of the district's total federal expenditures of $68 million. So no findings with respect to that program. Our audit standards require that we communicate certain items to you in your capacity as the audit committee charged with oversight and governance of the district's audit process. I've listed here the items. We've already covered some of them. The type of report that we issued and the standards and auditor independence and compliance with the Yellow Book GAGAS standards. We touched on that. I can confirm that we've remained independent and we have complied with all of the requirements of government auditing standards. We're required to inform you of our risk-based audit approach. This is the approach that those standards require us to take. We complete a risk assessment process as part of our planning stage and continually review and revise that as we proceed through the audit. If any information comes to our attention, we will revise our risk assessment and plan accordingly. So we focus on the significant risks affecting the financial statements and affecting compliance. So we consider risks related to the risks of error or the risks of fraud, such as misappropriation of assets. We consider these risks and how they could happen and how they could affect the financial statements or compliance. And we design audit procedures to respond to those risks. Material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, those are items 5 and 6. I already covered that. We did not have any. And I see I skipped over number 4, misstatements identified. If we identify material misstatements, we're required to inform you of that. If we identify misstatements that are not material, but that your team decides not to correct for any reason, we're required to inform you of that. We did not have any such items. Material noncompliance, number 7, we covered that. We did not identify any. Significant accounting policies and significant accounting estimates 8 and 9, I'll get into that when we talk about the financial statements next. And I mentioned some of the other types of findings we would be required to report. Number 10 and 11, known or likely question costs or known or likely fraud. We did not identify any of these items. Number 12, management representations. We are required to inform you that we will request certain representations from your management. This is a customary part of the audit as we wrap up. We request that your management will reaffirm their responsibility for the financial statements and their responsibility for compliance, and we'll request that from them. If you have an interest, you can request a copy of that representation letter. It should be available today. Other significant findings or issues. Our role as auditors is to report to you and to bring to your attention any information that we consider to be relevant to your responsibilities in your oversight and governance role of the entity. And we generally focus on the negative things. We're auditors. We look for problems. That's what we do. We look for misstatements. We look for noncompliance. We look for problems. But I think it's also relevant to inform you about, and Karen stood up here and mentioned the work done by the staff, that there's positive aspects, and you have a finance team that really, I think, could be the envy of a lot of your peers. You have professionals that have been with your organization for a long time and who have grown in their roles and who know their roles top to bottom and know the roles within the department top to bottom. And the fact that I'm standing here going through all of these items and have basically no findings to give you, I think really is a testament to that, the level of professionalism that you have within your organization. All right, my last topic is overview of the financial statements. Again, I'm happy to pause for any questions. Nothing? Okay. All right, so you do all have a copy of it. The document altogether, I think, is about 190 pages, pretty long. So what this is known as, we have the other acronym, Karen already mentioned it, it's the ACFR, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. It's prepared by your staff. I would like to mention also that of all of the school districts we work with, which is 40 plus every year as the external auditor, we have only a handful that prepare this document in-house. It is long, it is lengthy, it is complicated, and so not all school districts have the resources or the competency to prepare this in-house, and so the fact that your team is able to do this really
Sorry,
also
just
speaks.
one quick question. So the data that you guys collected, they use that to put this report together?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So the process that we typically follow is with the district's fiscal year end being August 31st. It takes some time for the team, your team, to close the books, so to speak, to wrap up the financial accounting records for the fiscal year. And so we take some time, we wait for that process to be complete, and then we come out here and we'll request trial balances, general ledgers, basically all the reports from the district's accounting system, and we perform audit procedures directed to that information. At the same time, the district is going to be taking that information and putting it in the form of financial statements. Does that address your question? Okay. The ACFR is a document that goes beyond, extends beyond the basic requirements of generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. GAAP requires basic financial statements and notes to financial statements and some supplementary schedules. Your district has elected to go beyond those requirements and participate in this voluntary enhanced reporting program, which is the ACFR program. I would say maybe 30 to 40% of districts in the state do this. It's really going above and beyond, and it's a program that is promulgated by the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA. The district also participates in the Association of School Business Officials, or ASBO program. Both of these programs are voluntary review programs where after the completion of the fiscal year audit and financial statements, this report will be submitted to the GFOA and to the ASBO for reviewers of both organizations to review and verify compliance with all applicable requirements of the programs. And assuming they find compliance, they will issue awards or certificates. The district did receive those awards for the fiscal year 2023 audit, and I expect we'll receive those awards for fiscal year 2024 as well. All right, moving on to the basic financial statements. The first one I wanted to point out is a statement of net position. This is on page 12. This is the balance sheet of the district as a whole. This takes all of the district's funds, all of the district's activities, and rolls them into one single presentation, which is the government-wide presentation. It's presented on the full accrual basis with an economic resources measurement focus. That means that this balance sheet includes all assets and liabilities of the district. So you'll see capital assets, you see land, buildings, furniture, all of that. You see the long-term debt with the bonds and the pension and the OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. All of those long-term assets and liabilities are included here. When we move into the fund financial statements, you'll notice that those things are not included. Those are presented on a different measurement focus and basis of accounting. The net position is what's really analogous to the equity of the entity. If we compare to private company financial statements, net position increased from last year by about 2.8 million. One thing I wanted to point out is that you have unrestricted net position, which is down at the bottom of this page, second to last line. That number is negative, which would indicate a deficit in your equity. Deficit in that category of the equity, I should say. There's different categories of equity of net position. That deficit is something that is very common. Almost all school districts report a deficit in unrestricted net position. I looked into it a few years ago and looked at a sample of 50 school districts. Only one of them didn't. The reason for this is because school districts are required to recognize their proportionate share of the TRS, teacher retirement system, net pension, and other post-employment benefits liabilities. Even though you're not responsible for paying these all at once, you recognize those in your financial statements, and those are big numbers. You can see them here about 2/3 of the way down the page. Net pension liability, net OPEB liability, 274 million and 111 million respectively. Those numbers feed into this deficit, so it's really not something to be alarmed about. It's been that way for several years, ever since the district became required to report this. Any questions about that?
Can you point out, I'm sorry, just to clarify,
Mhm.
can you point out where that deficit line is on the bottom?
Yes, it's the second to last row.
So that 132 million?
Yes. And
Thank
so
you.
what that is, if you wanted to do the math, well, I guess backing up a little bit, the net position section, which is the last section on this page, that in total is the equity. So you have assets minus liabilities equals equity. There are different categories of equity. The first one is your net investment in capital assets. That's separate because your capital assets are not liquid. You can't use those to pay for your liabilities. So the accounting principles require that you report that separately. So you have your net investment in capital assets, which is your long-term assets, the capital assets minus the related debt. Then you have another category, which is the restricted category, which is if you have bond funds or any other monies that are set aside for specific purposes, those are pulled out too. And the unrestricted is the residual, everything that's left. So if you were to take the cash and investments and receivables minus essentially your accounts payable and your pension and other post-employment benefits, you end up with this negative number. If you were to back out the pension and other post-employment benefits, you would be positive to the tune of $300 million.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sure. Okay, anything else? All right, next. So I mentioned that was the government-wide balance sheet. We're going to move into the governmental funds balance sheet with a focus on the general fund. This is on page 14. Following the government-wide financial statements, you'll find financial statements of all of the individual funds. The general fund is the main operating fund of the district, and so we're going to focus there. These fund financial statements are on the modified accrual basis, which means there's a focus on current financial resources. These are presented on a basis that's more similar to your budgetary basis. You're looking at the money in and the money out, and we don't have the capital assets. We don't have the OPEB and the pension liabilities in these financial statements because those are not relevant to this basis of accounting in this presentation. So we talk about net position on the government-wide statement. We have the same concept is called fund balance. In the fund financial statements, that's the equity of the fund. The total fund balance of the general fund as of the end of fiscal year 2024 was about $165 million. Compared to last year, that number was $163.8 million, so very comparable. Unassigned fund balance is the fund balance of the general fund, which is not restricted or assigned or designated for other purposes. That was $156 million as of the end of the fiscal year. Overall, the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of total is about 95%, which is consistent with last year. It was 94%. So that's a measure of liquidity. The majority of the fund balance of your fund is available for spending. Moving on to the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. This is the income statement equivalent for the general fund. This is on page 18. Total expenditures were $710 million. Net change in fund balance was $1.6 million positive. Compared to last year, total expenditures were $650 million. So you have an increase there. The majority of that increase is going to relate to payroll growth. You have an increase in FTEs as well as raises. The net change in fund balance was a negative $18 million last year. This year it switched to positive. The biggest reason for that is if you look towards the bottom of the page, you see the transfers in about 6 or so lines from the bottom. You had an $18.8 million transfer in from capital projects to the general fund. A few years ago, a capital maintenance fund was established with this money that was transferred from the general fund to provide for future maintenance capital projects needs. With the issuance of bonds, that's no longer needed. It was transferred back. I know this is probably not news to you because you approved it. So that's the biggest swing in the general fund.
I have a question about
yeah,
that. Is
sure.
that a common practice amongst any other districts?
Yeah, it's very common. We see that all the time. We'll see either a transfer, which is what you did to move the money to a separate fund, or sometimes we'll see an internal commitment or designation of that fund balance. You might keep the money in your general fund, but just set it aside with a formal commitment of the funds. But setting aside the money in either form is very common.
Okay, thank you.
I've included here the ratios of unassigned fund balance to total expenditures. That's a ratio we commonly look at for school districts. It's a judge of your financial position. The ratio last year was 23.6%. This year is 22%. And what that means is we're looking at fund balance measured against your typical level of expenditures it's to see where, you know, if the world kind of came to the end and you no longer had revenues and funding that you were collecting, your existing fund balance could fund approximately 22% of a fiscal year's expenditures. That's about 2 or 3 months. So that's a good position to be in. Highly unlikely that you're going to stop collecting, you know, your other funding sources. So it's not really a realistic scenario, but it's kind of a metric and benchmark where we look at changes and where we might see increases or decreases. You stay consistent, and that's on par with what's average or typical for school districts in Texas.
I have a question, that is also standard to keep that, and does it affect, and this may be actually, it should, maybe not for you, and you can tell me that. That also goes to us on our bond rates and things like that, the positives, ability to get them at a better rate and so forth, is to show we have that funding in there.
Yes, yes. So it goes both ways. So you don't want that ratio to be too high, because
You're sitting on it.
you're sitting on it, exactly. I mean, you're collecting money from sources, and there's, you know, it goes with, you understand, you don't want to hoard the money, right? But you don't want that to be too low, because it's really your cushion for contingencies. And so bond ratings or other similar type of financial reviews will consider that really as a risk factor. If that cushion, so to speak, is too low, might, you know, raise some flags or concerns.
I purposely asked that right now, even though I kind of knew that answer, because a lot of times when we're out and about, we get that question a lot, or I get that question. I can't speak for everyone else, but I get that question a lot. Why are we sitting on so much money there when I mean, it just sits there, and I explain over and over that it's kind of required. Even though it's not, it is, and so I just wanted that out there for people to hear and see if they happen to go back and watch this streamed video.
Yes, I think that's really fair to say that it's kind of required, that it's not required, but it is, right? Just like a private enterprise, if you're running too lean, that's a risky position to be in, because there are contingencies, there are things that come up, there are hurricanes, right? There are things that happen, there are coronaviruses and stuff like that, where you need to be in a safe place to continue to pay your salaries and continue to fund operations. You can't just close your doors. You're a school district. So.
I liken it to our savings account.
Yes, that's perfect.
Or our emergency funds.
Yes, that's a perfect way to think
And
of it.
what's the ideal percentage again?
Around in the range of 20% or so. We look at, you know, in terms of a year, like 2 months is kind of how we would look at that. And that's about where you guys are, 2 to 3 months. 2.5 to 3 months is really where you're at. Okay. So that's it in terms of the basic financial statements that I plan to focus on. If you look through the document, you'll see there's financial statements of all of the funds. And if you look towards the back, you'll see that there's, you know, combining statements. There's a lot of detail there. So if you have a particular interest in any individual fund, that information will be in the report. The notes to financial statements, I mentioned earlier on my slide about the required communications, that we are as auditors, we inform you of our judgments about the district's accounting policies and disclosures. I've listed here some of the more key disclosures, or the ones that we would consider more key. It really depends on where your interest lies. The district's financial policies are in line with the financial requirements of the TEA. The TEA is very specific. One, school districts are required to adhere to GAAP, which is the generally accepted accounting principles, and those are set by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, as GASB. Districts are required to adhere to those, as well as to the TEA's requirements in terms of financial statement presentation disclosure. There are certain required disclosures by the TEA, and the district conforms to all of those. I mentioned earlier about the estimates. I touched on the pension and the other post-employment benefits plan. There are lengthy disclosures in the financial statements about those 2 items. Those are the most significant estimates affecting the financial statements. You saw those dollar amounts. They're big. Those are estimates. What those are essentially at a high level is a actuarial estimate, a projection of future obligations. The district is participating in the TRS pension and other benefits plan. So there's a projection of the future obligations of the TRS plan. That projection involves inputs that are highly subjective, including estimates of mortality rates, estimates of retirement rates, estimates of healthcare cost trends. So those future obligations are then discounted back to present value to come up with an estimated present value of future benefits. That number can swing. You tweak any of those inputs that go into that estimate, that number can swing greatly. And there are disclosures included in both Note 13 and 14 about the sensitivity of those estimates. In the pension disclosure, for example, I would call your attention to page 52. There's a table that shows where that estimate is currently versus if the discount rate was adjusted 1% either way. The current discount rate is 7%. If that was changed to 8% or 6%, which would be a reasonable change, it's just 1%. That number could swing anywhere within the range of 410 million to 161 million. So we're talking about minor tweaks, big swings. Similarly, there are disclosures on pages 56 and 57 for the other post-employment benefit plans, where if those estimates, those inputs were tweaked just a little bit, how those numbers would change. So those are significant estimates and really kind of a best guess of conceptually where these liabilities lie. After the notes to the financial statements, the other sections in the ACFR are the required supplementary information. You have a general fund budget schedule, and then also 4 schedules related to the pension and the OPEB, which include up to 10 years of historical data on these figures. Following that, you have a section for other supplementary information. I mentioned that there are schedules of each individual fund in combining format, as well as some additional schedules which are required by the Texas Education Agency, including a schedule of long-term debt and property taxes receivable. Finally, you have the statistical section. This is a section that is required under the ACFR voluntary program, the enhanced reporting program that the district has elected to include. These schedules include financial and operating information, demographic and economic information, trends essentially for the last 10 years. And that's it. That's a high-level overview of Weaver, who we are, what we do, and then your audit, as well as the financial statements. Thanks again for your time this morning. I really appreciate it, and happy to be here to talk with you about these things and answer any additional questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you, too, to the team here that took so much time to put this together. It's a lot of information.
I also,
Sorry, I just had
I'll-
one more question.
and I'm just going to finish on, thank you all for your flexibility on moving this meeting. I appreciate that, as 3 of us here weren't even here on Tuesday, so being here early on the 15th would have been brutal. So we thank you very much for your flexibility on rescheduling this meeting.
I should have asked this earlier, sorry. Okay, the voluntary review program, what is different about that? What is an addition from the regular, GAAP reporting that you do? I'm
Yes.
sure you said that, but I'm still waking up right now.
Yeah,
so.
sure. So if you look at the ACFR as a document, if you look at the table of contents, it's broken out into sections. The introductory section, which includes a transmittal letter, it includes an organizational chart, it includes some information about elected and appointed officials. That is additional. Also additional is the statistical section, which is towards the end of the document. That's the demographic information, economic information, historical trends, which is the additional information and is something that is what typically will prevent districts that don't participate in this program typically don't because of the statistical section, because that is a lot of data to gather and put together in 10-year schedules. So, but it's also something that we find is very common, one of the most interesting areas of the ACFR, because it looks at things in a lot of different ways. So those are the parts of the report that are additional. The process that is additional is, as I mentioned before, the submission for voluntary review. This report for both programs, but I'll focus on the GFOA program because that's really what is driving the ACFR. This report will be submitted to the GFOA, and it will be subject to review by 2 additional reviewers. One reviewer will be a voluntary member of the GFOA Special Review Committee, and those are independent accounting professionals. So we have auditors or governmental accounting professionals that are in the field. I'm a member of the Special Review Committee. Our concurring partner on this engagement, Laura Lambert, also is. I think we have 8 or 9 other partners within Weaver who are members of the Special Review Committee. So there's that level of review. And then there's also a review by an internal GFOA reviewer. So there's 2 additional reviews. And what they do is they'll review the ACFR and the presentation and the disclosures, all of it, including the introductory section all the way to the statistical section, to confirm that it complies with the requirements of GAAP and the GFOA. And then any findings, any feedback will be returned to the district for consideration. So every year there's they'll get a letter with some feedback, and it usually talks about, upcoming accounting principles that are on the horizon, things like that. Questions, things to clarify maybe next year. But assuming that all of the requirements are met, then the award will be issued for, it's a certificate of excellence for achievement in financial reporting is what the award is called. So the districts that pass essentially will receive that. And I think that the district has probably received that for 20 years or more in a row. So a long track record there.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Moving-
Sarah, if I could, just
go
for a second, I'm sure Karen's communicated with you, but board meeting is Tuesday night, but we're weather dependent. We're hoping that maybe in the next day or two, we'll have a weather date if we had to cancel Tuesday night, so we'll be able to communicate that with you, but we don't want you driving from Houston up here in dangerous conditions either, so, well, okay.
All right, moving on to item number 4, consider and approve minutes from the September 10, 2024 Audit and Investments Committee meeting. Do I have a motion, or do we need to hear from Ms.
you'll need to
Garza?
vote on
Yeah, we need,
Yes.
approving of
we need to vote on
the
that.
ACFR to the full board.
I'm sorry, let's back up to number 3. Thank you, Ms. Garza. All right, so we need to approve the recommendation of the district's 2024 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report that was presented to us this morning. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? All right, approved. Now we're moving on to item number 4. Consider and approve minutes from the September 10th, 2024 Audit and Investments Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? All right. Now, Mr. Hayden, item number 5, receive status update of the 24-25 internal audit plan.
Chairman Dungan, members of the Audit Committee, Dr. Knoll, guests, welcome to the exciting world of internal audit. I'm Brian Hayden. I am the manager of internal audit. I've been here for 5.5 years. So just an overall, we perform operational and financial audits. We co-source with Weaver, and I'll get into that in a little more detail. There's the administrative part, and I report to y'all with a dotted line to the CFO. Linda Doran is our staff auditor, so she handles 2 different things. She handles the PTO part that we can do, so that's helping PTOs with the proper paperwork and, answering questions for them, having tax seminars, and then she also does the activity fund part. Now, the co-source with Weaver, we started that back in 2020. It has been an incredible help to internal audit. We helped pay for this by, I got rid of my admin support, and we also brought construction audits in-house, so we weren't paying a third party to do those anymore. Weaver brings us IT expertise, something that we did not have, and we were not doing IT audits at all before 2020. They provide just general audit support, so we've had the same senior for 2 years, a lady named Daz Thomas, who everyone loves, so we've had that continuity. That's great. And then for different audits like the one we're working on right now, which is our HR recruitment and retention, they give us subject matter experts to help with that. So it's really a win-win audit-wise and financially. We save money for the district by doing this, by not having to hire somebody, trying to find a place for them, and honestly, to hire IT people is prohibitively expensive. It just is. So this has worked out great, and we've really appreciated everything that Weaver's brought to the table.
Can I ask about the financial piece? So the ACFR that we just went over, did your team play a role in that as well, or is that
No,
something that
that's
only
totally
Weaver
separate.
does?
Yeah.
Okay, so what financial audits do you cover then?
Well,
What types of financial audits?
we look at, procurement, we look at the numbers and what they're buying and getting into how that money's spent. If, I'm trying to think back, like child nutrition is another one where we really looked at how the money's handled and, looked through transactions. So just, there's a financial piece. Now, some audits are mostly operational, but then there's some that also have a financial piece. Just kind of depends on the audit. But we don't get into the financial.
The financial
yeah,
statements.
statement audit, correct. That's totally separate. We have 2 levels of findings in our reports, and one is called opportunity for improvement. That's the higher risk, and that's where we require management response to our recommendations. And then we have observations, which are considered lower risk. Management response is optional. So it would be nice if you did this, but it's not critical that you do this. Our audits are conducted in accordance with the International Professional Practices Framework issued by the IIA, and the audit plan every year is determined. We do a risk assessment, so we have different audit areas, then we'll send out a risk assessment spreadsheet to y'all, and we ask that you say, hey, we think this is higher risk, this is lower risk, and we kind of, we have weighted averages and then we sum that up, and kind of depending, there's a rotation as well in the audit plan. So, every 5 years we're going to do procurement. Every 5 years we're going to hit transportation, right? But then there's other, audits that are kind of determined by that risk assessment. And then there's also a place in there for y'all to say, we would like you to look at this. We think that this particular area needs to be looked at. So all that's considered. That goes out into March, and then we present that at the May Audit Committee for your all's approval. And then that audit plan kind of kicks off September 1st.
So sorry, who does the risk assessment, or who looks at that?
So I get it ready, and then I send it to senior management. So Dr. Null, Dr. Medford, Karen, and then to the audit committee. So.
Okay. So what would you say are our top or highest risks right now across the district?
IT for one.
Okay.
Always construction, just because of the amounts of money involved. However, I will say, in the construction audits we've done, we haven't found any issues. We have a great group down there that really knows their business and does a great job on that. But again, there's a ton of money involved in that. Anything that has like a lot of cash, like child nutrition, would be one. So, and it used to be band instruments was a high-risk area, but not anymore. So you never know.
To that point, Mr. Hayden, can you point out, because I was here on the previous audit committee, but internal audits in Conroe ISD, you came on board 5.5 years ago, I believe. When did we start doing our internal auditing?
Well, we had an internal audit department before then. However, they were focused pretty much strictly on activity fund audits, and then they outsource the construction audits. That's really it.
So up until about 3 years ago, I think you said?
Well, up to
construction.
2019, 2020.
But
That's
for
what-
construction, I'm sorry, specifically construction, I think I wrote it down. You said we were doing those externally, but we began doing them in-house what year?
Oh, the construction audits, in 2020,
2020?
yeah.
Okay, maybe that's what I heard.
And we did just to give you a little more of the history piece, we did an external construction audit on Grand Oaks High School, I believe was the big one that we did.
Yeah.
No findings, and so and it's very expensive. That was part of the shift to then moving internal, so we're not spending that money. But the whole scope of internal audit shifted about 5 years ago from that. It was, as he mentioned, exclusively activity fund driven, which there's a lot of cash in activity funds, and we would have findings, and we still do. You still see the activity funds things, and they're not perfect, but the true risk was minimal. Like we might find something was dispersed without prior consent, but it was approved. It was there was nothing. We weren't losing money anywhere. So we made this shift about 5 years ago to really focus on big department areas of risk, and like where from procurement, transportation, all the things. And he mentioned, and we'll see a kind of a follow up to this, but like one of them was band instruments. Never been audited. It's a ton of money, and the first audit we had in that area was not good. And it wasn't that we had a lot of instruments stolen or gone. It was that the record keeping was poor. Since then, we have changed all the structure. Like internal audit has worked exactly as it should. We learned. We've adapted new systems. We'll see the update in that tonight. But those are the type of audits that before 5 years ago, we never did. It was purely activity funds. That's all internal audit ever did. So
What consists of an activity audit? Like what exactly are you looking at with activities, just so I
So they're looking at how the money's dispersed.
can I answer one question? Just
Oh, sure.
for activity funds are non-budgeted funds that live on a campus. So they're campus-based monies. They may come to the campus through donations or through fundraisers, that type of thing. So just first to kind of to define what an
Can you give
activity
an
fund is.
example,
That's
like,
what I was asking.
like
Yeah, so-
senior dues?
Playground.
Yeah, senior
Playgrounds.
dues, the money that you make at a dance, all the things. And When you-
Fundraising for a playground.
absolutely,
or
when you get
books
to
for
a high school,
library.
that could be well over seven-figure numbers in activity funds cumulatively in a high school.
Would that be like Booster Club fundraising money?
Booster Club is separate. So
Okay, so it's a
activity
different-
fund is the school's
Okay,
controlled.
so-
Booster fund or PTO money is still, that's outside accounting. It's not in our accounts. Activity fund is what sits in our account. So it may be that, a place where you see a lot of activity fund money in and out is band, for example. So if they have a $1,500 band dues or whatever, that comes in. If they're going to travel, money may come into that activity fund, and then it gets expended out when they book the travel. So it's kind of that flow in and out, but it's non-budgeted money is really the
And
key
it's
difference.
managed by campus
It is,
personnel?
yes.
That was my question, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, kind of just on the internal audit overview?
Do you have a spreadsheet of kind of what the plan is for the year, or like, did you say there's a 5-year cycle?
Yeah,
Is that something that we
It's-
could
it's
see?
more- It's a 4 or 5 year cycle, kind of depending on, if we had no findings, let's say in a major area, then we may wait 5 years to go back. If we had a ton of findings, we're going to do a follow-up the next year, just on the findings part, to see if management actually, followed through on what they said they were gonna do. But then we'll also probably put that on a track to visit again, then maybe in another 3 years. So,
Okay.
And
4 year,
I'm sorry, but you all are joining kind of mid-cycle. So what you'll see tonight is, this morning, is his presentation on where we are currently in this year's audit plan. before we start next year, he will come, once he gathers the risk assessment, feedback from everybody, he will come at the beginning of the year and say, and share with you his proposed plan. You all as an audit committee will approve it, and that's the plan for the year. So today, you're gonna see like the halfway point, because we're mid-year.
How do you determine that plan, I guess is what I'm trying to figure out.
Through the risk assessment.
Okay,
So next year, I already know that the police department and child nutrition's kind of next in the rotation. So those are two good-sized audits, but that leaves everything else open.
Could we get, unless I missed it, could you give us a overview of what the plan, the calendar of what you're expecting, like you just said, next year we know this is where we're headed, the next year we're tentatively looking at these.
Yeah, I can put something together like
Thank
that
you.
and send it to you.
Yeah.
That would be helpful for me.
So just to be sure, that's not in what we received for this presentation,
No, right now, we're gonna talk about.
this previous cycle?
Previous, yeah. the
Right, because
cycle
we
we're in
approved
right
something
now.
in May. We
So we're
approved
in
the
the
list in May.
24-25 audit plan. And then in May, I'll present the 25-26 plan. And then y'all, like Dr. Knoll said, will approve it, or, so hopefully, like I said, when I send out that risk assessment, if you have areas, we want to hear from you. We want your input.
could we get a copy of the risk assessment? I'm just
From
curious
last year,
to
sure.
see what
Absolutely.
that looks like.
Yep.
I'm a visual person,
No, I
so
understand.
it helps
I'm
me
a numbers
to
guy, I
see
know, I
it.
like my spreadsheets. So you can, and it'll show you the weighting.
Yeah.
And, you know, that, all that,
Perfect,
so,
thank you.
okay. All right, the 24-25 audit plan. So, activity funds, we've got 3 of them done. Now, I say this every year, but because Diane does PTO and activity funds, the first part of the year is very PTO heavy. School started, you got new booster clubs, you know, people are trying to get their taxes filed, so she's pretty much focused 70% of her time on the PTO. After Christmas break, then it's more of a activity fund audit focus. So, I know it doesn't look like there's a lot done on that, but just, that's kind of how it goes every year.
Now,
Is the goal to hit every school
No.
or what? Okay,
Just what's on here.
but I mean in general.
In general, the plan is to hit every school, 5 years, we've got
Every
70
5 years.
schools, yeah.
Mr. Hayden, you mentioned PTO. You said Diane was focused on PTO beginning of the school year? I thought we said PTO was external, or that was separate.
No, PTO, so
You-
what we do for the PTOs is strictly, they'll call and say, what form do I need to fill out to be tax exempt? And then Diane helps them with that, and they say, what do I need to do to make sure that my tax stuff's in on time? And she'll help guide them to a point.
And can you maybe explain, I asked this last year, but we call them organizations, not
Yeah.
associations, because they do operate under our 501c3s.
Right, so we have something that's called the Conroe ISD Educational Support Group. And it's kind of this umbrella that we have a lot of the PTOs under, and that allows them to be tax exempt without having to file themselves. Okay, so that saves them $600, and
But we do not audit their funds.
no.
But so
They're-
they're operating under our umbrella, but we're not auditing
It's
them.
strictly in an umbrella for that tax exemption.
Okay, if they were an association, they would have to spend the 600 annually, is that correct?
If they were not under us, they would have to,
By being an association?
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just y'all, because that was explained to me last year, I just
Yeah.
wanted everyone to
Are we
understand.
at risk, I'm so sorry,
Go ahead.
are we at risk in any way based on the fact that we don't audit them, but yet they use our 501c3?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You know, I said, this year, we were trying to hit the elementary schools because a lot, what we had done in the past, was the high schools, because that's where the money is. So, but we said, you know what, we really need to get out and hit a lot of these elementary schools, just to, because everyone needs to get audited at some point. So that's why it looks so elementary heavy this year.
What is the process that you use to identify which elementary schools you're going to focus on? Is it random, or are you looking at certain?
We're looking at, number one, what school haven't we hit in the longest? So that's kind of number two. If we did an audit of an elementary school and it wasn't good, then yeah, we're gonna put them right back on for the next year.
So back to history a little bit. What we used to do was, what would trigger these audits was a principal change or a secretary change, because that's the two people that touch these the most. What we learned in the process, though, is sometimes we would have campuses that haven't had a principal or secretary change in a long time, and they weren't triggering to be audited. And then so then you finally go back and audit it. It might have been 7, 8, 9 years. They could have been making a mistake for those 7 or 8, 9 years, and we never caught it. So now we've changed that cycle to make sure we're rotating folks back in a little more regularly, so that we can address the concerns. And we see typical. Unfortunately, we can coach and we try the things, but we see common mistakes. We actually have already scheduled our next principal meeting to go over the top 3 common mistakes that we see with them again, just to refresh their memory. It's one of the areas which we focus on in our principal training piece for new principals and those that are aspiring to be principals, because one of the major differences in job description from assistant principal to principal is dealing with financials. You are never prepared as an educator to deal with financials until you become the principal. They don't teach us that in school. You don't do it as an assistant principal, so it's an immediate change. So we really try to focus on our internal preparation for folks to prepare them for this area, and then provide a lot of support to them as well, because it's just they were probably great teachers and they were great assistant principals, and they become principal, and it's just a different skill set.
And so again, sorry, I used to be an auditor, so sorry. So these audits, it's just activity funds and PTO, correct?
It's just the activity fund.
It's just the activity fund.
Just the activity. So if you look at the audit scope, we look at cash controls, bank recs, cash receipts, cash disbursements, and fundraisers. Okay, on the PTO side, we're strictly there just to help them navigate the paperwork maze. And we set up a tax seminar a couple times a year for all the PTO presidents and treasurers. So that's because they're really separate from CISD. So that's really all we're doing for them. But we have a lot of booster clubs, a lot of PTO. So where it doesn't sound like a lot to say, well, we just help them with paperwork. You got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these organizations. It takes time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right. So first audit, procurement, we completed in September 2024. So opportunities for improvement. We found that purchasing does not track vendor modifications. Obviously, that's something that you really want to make sure that hey, who's doing it, that they're doing it correctly, that you want to have some kind of review process in place to where you're making sure that these are being done correctly. And also, just FYI, I always have like the heads of the departments that we're going to talk about here to answer specific questions about how they're going to follow up on all our recommendations. The district does not have an established process to routinely evaluate its vendors. We have like forms in place, but they really weren't on the website, and it was really an informal process of gathering that data. And then purchasing does not have clear procedures for preparing or approving the cost price analysis necessary to meet federal requirements. So, you know, we've got to meet what the Fed wants. So we just have to make, again, we a lot of times we have these parts, they're just not in a written down process that's going to be followed consistently, and that's what we're looking for. So observations, there have been instances where campuses received goods in e-finance that were meant for the warehouse and didn't notify the warehouse. This would be obsolete inventory.
Sorry, can we go back
Yeah,
just
sure.
one? So if there's a finding, an opportunity, or what is it? Opportunities for improvement, is that, how do you ensure that they have done what you have asked them to do? Do
We
you go
follow
back
up
the following
Next
year?
Yeah, so we will, part of the 25-26 audit will be to go back to procurement and go back to transportation and say, okay, here's what you said you were gonna do. Now, you know, we're gonna do some testing around that just to make sure that it's actually happening.
Okay, so if there is a finding, you go back the
Yes.
following year? Okay.
But it's limited to that.
It's limited to just that, okay.
Right.
And I noticed just in some of the language, you know, it says recommends versus observation is should. Recommend sounds more like an optional
Yeah,
require. I'm not sure if that language is intended to be like that, or it just seems like it's more of an optional. We're recommending you do this.
I mean, internal audit, you know, we can't tell anyone what to do. We can say, we recommend, here's what we found, here's what we think you should do, but it's always up to management to look at the cost benefits of doing that and say yes or no, we agree with that. And if we agree, here's what we're gonna do. So just like we can't design the control, we can make an observation about and a recommendation, but we can't design that control for you, because from an independent standpoint, we can't go audit a control that we designed, because we're gonna say it's great, it's perfect.
In the interest of time, and just so we can kind of follow the presentation a little better, would it be possible for us to hold questions until the end of the presentation?
Are y'all good with that?
It's probably, if you want to have questions on the specific audit that we're talking about, you know, because what I don't want to do is go and have people forget, oh, I meant to ask this, and so.
Okay.
Let's see, opportunities of improvement, we've got obsolete inventory was valued at $116,856, representing 4,600 items. This represented a financial and storage issue. So what we found was a lot of important, expensive inventory was sitting out on the shop floor because there wasn't room for it in the locked cage. And part of that, not all of it, but part of it was because we had this obsolete inventory that needed to be cleared out. And we needed to get that expensive, like the brake pads and stuff, off the shop floor where guys can just grab them, and into a locked cage where there's a lot more control over it. The things we recommended was monthly random inventory counts, just and to make sure that the inventory is what they think it is. Okay, so, oh, that's transportation, sorry. So, any procurement questions?
And we do have new, just, for the sake of everybody, we're all kind of joining at different times. We have new leadership in purchasing.
Yep.
So, we have opportunity now. I think it's a perfect opportunity to restructure some of the way that we operate. It's good timing to have had this audit because we do have new leadership. Our director and assistant director moved on, and so we've hired new folks. So it's a perfect opportunity to look at procedure, change them, and then come back next year and have it re-looked at to make sure that what we put in place is working and doing the right things.
Has that been since the first of the school year or just recently? Is that more recent?
I was appointed in May, so basically started June 1, so that was the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, that way everybody can hear you.
Sorry about that. I know I can holler about that, but, so that was a recommendation of the board with the changeover that I was starting in June, that since there was new leadership change, it was a good opportunity to come in through internal audit, really, tear everything apart, take a look at things and give me feedback on areas of opportunity. And I can speak very, very quickly to the things that we've already done as far as the audit findings, with the first one being the vendor information. So there is actually a report that is an on-demand report that is in our e-finance system where we can see vendor changes that are modifications. It's a line-by-line item. And then at the end of the day, what really came out of that was there wasn't a cultural representation within the department that report existed. And so honestly, our clerks were extremely excited to have that report because they could go back and check their changes to make sure that if they had left anything out. As far as the evaluation of vendors, that was actually something that was relatively in place. There was a form that you could go on to our internal website. Unfortunately, when the last director left, that was tied to his email, and so it was non-functioning. We've since got that back in place. It kind of just is a Google form, so once he left, it went away. So we've got that back up and running on our internal website. And then as far as the recommendation for the 2 CFR 200 for federal, it was a very good recommendation because there's just a line in 2 CFR 200 that says you must complete an independent price estimate, but there's no stipulation or anything around how that should look. So it was a great recommendation of Weaver of go ahead and establish a protocol and put it into your procedures manual, which we've already done and are actively doing.
So could that explain this Google document you mentioned? Does that explain why I have heard from vendors that have applied and maybe didn't feel like they were included in the
that's
selection?
completely separate from what we're talking about. So this vendor form was for internal, what I always call my customers, so our employees, to provide feedback on vendors. So if they're having issues or concerns or things of that nature, they have a method to submit a form. It's probably not going to be actively used because we have such a great relationship, an open relationship, especially with our secretaries, who I personally think is who we serve on a daily basis. I mean, love our principals, love our administrators to death, but we are there to serve the secretaries. So there is not one person that I've found that does not hesitate to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm having a little trouble. So we've received one survey since reactivating it, so we do know it works. And we jumped all over the issue that we had. So.
But that's an internal document
That
strictly?
is an internal document, and yes, ma'am, and it's for them to provide feedback.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, move on to transportation. So, same part. We found at transportation, we went out and again, there was a lot of just like old inventory that was taking up space. So we wanted to make sure that we got the expensive stuff into the locked cages, and that transportation also had a plan to go ahead and get rid of this obsolete inventory.
Is this the first time you've done a transportation
No, we
audit
did
in a while, or?
4 years ago.
4 years?
And this kind of worked out, again, there was a change in leadership in transportation, so this was a perfect opportunity again to come and do this. security at the transportation centers needed to be reviewed. We're in open session, so I'm not gonna get into details, but yeah, there were things that we were able to point out where we felt that security could be better. Driver credentials such as, you know, the CDLs, required physicals and certifications, they were not being adequately tracked or updated in a timely manner. So, and part of the problem, they were still using paper but moving to electronic. So that was one of the recommendations, was you need it all in one spot electronically and have a process where it's reviewed and tracked on a regular basis.
I had heard from Mr. McCord that we had a software that's now tracking that. Are we going to be updated in the audit, or the update in a year?
Yeah, sure.
From the
Yeah,
board?
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to
So
hear how that
any major
software-
changes we would cover on that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear how that software is working when you go
Yeah.
back and check on the findings.
That will be brought to us in May? Will that be brought to us in May during?
No, so
No, it's
in
not
May,
sure.
this May, I'll bring you the audit plan for 25-26. So
Okay.
I'll probably follow up on transportation in October, so we want like a year to go by from the last audit, just to make sure that the systems are in place and that we've got plenty of data to audit. You don't want to go back a month later, because then there's really not the data. You want to go a year and make sure that, okay, yeah, it's actually working.
Okay.
And we do
So-
have, Mr. Melendez is here, so
Yeah.
maybe once Brian runs through his transportation things, I'd just like for y'all to
Right.
meet Juan anyway, so he could come up, maybe just share with you a couple, just like Brian did, just a couple updates of what they're already done. So,
Yeah, that one stood out to me as a little alarming
What-
with the certification. So I don't know if that's a liability issue, but I'm glad that you caught that. So definitely want to make sure we're doing that.
Observations, segregation of duties for fuel recording. So you don't want the same person ordering fuel and reconciling how much fuel there is. I mean, it's just, right? So we brought that up. The pro keys, like this fob that you use, you go up to the pump and you hit the pump with it, and then you know, you put in like how many miles, you know, on your bus and all this. So they're trying to track, right? Are you filling up after you've only driven 100 miles? Well, why are you doing that? So what we found was that, you know, you have a group of people that are kind of like constantly getting these fobs reprogrammed for one reason or another, and they weren't really tracking the data on that. And you really, if you really want to know who's doing it and when and why. So that was just one of the observations. Loaner tablets, again, if a driver, one of their tablets is broken or something, they get a loaner, but there really wasn't any way of tracking who's getting those loaners, what's happening to them, and are they being returned. So it's just something that you would want. So I think that's it for transportation. Let Juan come up and.
Good morning. So the obsolete issue, the obsolete parts issue, that happens because we keep old buses, right? And we auction off old buses, but a lot of times we forget to auction off the old parts as well. So they were taking up room. We actually were able to account for all the obsolete parts. We palleted those off. They are sitting at the warehouse in February of this month. All that stuff will be auctioned off. That did open up some room in our parts rooms, where we now have the ability to bring in some of our other items that we had out in the shop area that should have been behind the parts room. So we've done that at this moment. As far as credentials goes, nobody had expired credentials. We just didn't have them in an electronic centralized location. With the Laserfish program that we'll be, actually they're coming in and picking up our folders on the 24th. We will set up electronic folders for all of our employees, and then from there we'll have the ability to upload any type of credential that they have, whether it's their certification, their driver's license, their their physicals, so that we're keeping track at a centralized location, and all of our supervisors and managers have access to that. As far as observations goes, we are tracking fueling. We made sure that now our parts clerks are in charge of ordering. I'm sorry, the foremen are in charge of ordering the fuel, and that our parts clerks are in charge of making sure that the fuel that was ordered is received, and we're accounting for that, and we're checking that on a monthly basis. We are checking the keys, the bus keys, the fueling keys, to make sure that we're constantly monitoring that not the same employees are constantly being their keys reprogrammed. We're doing that on a monthly basis as well. I'm checking over that, our fleet manager and our payroll manager, to make sure that we're not updating keys to the same individuals over and over to pick up on any anomalies or things of that nature. And last but not least, as far as the tablets, so yes, we do have loaner tablets. When our tablets break or they're damaged, SmartTag will send us some loaners while we were getting ours fixed. We did not have a process in place to check those out, but we do have a process now in place at each center where they're able to go in, check out a loaner tablet, sign out for it, and as soon as their tablet comes out, they sign back in for that tablet and they turn it back in.
Thank you for the clarification on certifications.
Sure, sure.
Also, on the parts control clerks, are
Yes.
they keeping electronic records of what's going in, what's going out, what buses they're going on?
Yes, ma'am.
So that we know if there's something going more frequently on a bus and so
Correct.
forth?
Correct. We are exploring new software though, because right now what I found is that a lot of basically the technology that we're using, the software that we're using, is kind of, to put it in a layman's terms, we're operating off Atari, where everybody's kind of operating on PS5. So we want to get to a point where we're not needing to shuffle as much paper and inputting as much data to figure out, okay, we got this part and we're inventorying it, and now we're going to inventory it out. We're looking at a program that all that will be done, with a scanner, which will make it a lot easier and a lot less paper. So you're limiting errors and you're making it more efficient.
Well, thank goodness we're not operating off Pong, because that would be really bad.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know probably no one in this room knows what that is. So anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Juan.
Okay. Now for my proud moment. Band instruments. So in 2020, we did band instruments for the first time. Dr. Horton, come on up.
Yeah, you had to make this walk when it wasn't good. Go make it now. Celebrate it today.
Dr. Horton and I, this has been our baby for 4 years. As you can see, in 2020, we had a slight issue with missing instruments, and I wanted to show us how we have brought it down each time we've done the audit, and a lot of that goes to Dr. Horton and his team, and it goes to show that if you put a process in place and you enforce that process and you communicate that process, it works. So Dr. Horton and I actually go out to the schools and count these instruments. We do it every other year, okay? So then on odd years, it's up to the band directors, but the principals of the school have to sign off on that. So everyone's kind of got skin in the game on this. So again, we've gone from 440,000 and 153 missing to 2 and $2,800. So, Dr. Horton.
Excellent job. Excellent job.
Oh, if it's okay, I'd just like to make a few quick comments.
Absolutely.
One, it is an honor to stand here and to address you with this news. Two, I believe that one of the major changes that's happened, I first requested this prior to Mr. Hayden's arrival, that we begin to examine this, because We do request every year for what we would term capital outlay for instruments, and the essential question was, how do we know that we're not buying what we already have or what we don't need or things like that? And so, so we determined what we actually had, and that was not only, as you could see, things that were missing, but now things that have been added, and they're added due to a number of means. One of them is it could be that we did purchase through capital outlay something for a school. Another one, it could be that it's a donated instrument that a student and a parent move on from a program and they want to have another child have that opportunity. And of course, we evaluate those to see if it's something we want to take ownership of as well. So that being the case, as Mr. Hayden said, for the one that we completed for junior high band and orchestra that was completed at the end of November, we actually visited 46 different classrooms to be able to physically inventory the instruments with the cooperation of the teachers through the digital processes that we have that are ongoing. And then previous audit committees have not only asked us to develop a process to do this on a more frequent basis because, again, this is a yearly acquiring or procurement of instruments, but also with the number of programs that we have, it's an ongoing not only staffing thing that if we turn over teachers, we want to make sure we have accurate records, but as we've grown as a district and added campuses, which we will do substantially over the next several years, we want to make sure we had good processes in place to know what we have and what we need going forward. So that being said, like I said, it's an honor to be here to present this type of report, and I know that we'd be happy to entertain any kind of questions you might have.
So were they truly missing? Where were they? Or
So-
did we just buy new instruments and get donations? Sorry, I just want to understand.
No. We have an accurate inventory from year to year of what we actually have. What happened with these two particular instruments is they were carried over from a previous as missing, and we, sometimes we have kids that leave and check out of school, and we've got a process in place now for when they have an instrument that's owned by the district, but it was assigned to them for the year. We have processes in place to recover those. In these two particular cases, we have not been able to locate these instruments for almost 5 years. So these actually preceded the first time that we came through the audit process. So we don't know if they never were there and were listed or they were assigned to someone else. We're not really sure. But
I
at
mean
some
more
point you have
like
to say
in-
they're gone.
I mean in 2020 when there was 153 missing.
Okay, so
Was that just more of a process
that was
issue?
absolutely a process
Okay.
question. And honestly, again, I go back to staffing because when a new director comes in, they can only go with the information they've been given at that point. So we've also changed to a much more updated software system. The system that we used previously was sunsetted by the company, and a new company bought it, completely rebuilt it from the ground up, and that's the one that we're using now, which is not only user-friendly, but also able to be accessed by any one of our, the Fine Arts Office, the Internal Audit Office. We all have both viewing and editing privileges on that, so we can see almost real time what's happening. Okay, so I don't know if that answers your question, Ms. Dawson. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So I'm assuming we make an accounting adjustment so that next year we'll start out fresh again because we already know we have two missing, so we're
Yes.
not going to carry those over.
Correct, and
Okay.
and now that those two have been listed as missing, they are, we vetted that they are actually missing. They're removed from the inventory so that we don't continue to sort of accrue
Keep
that
looking, yes.
going forward. And the valuation of the instruments is based on current replacement value, not a depreciated value or anything like that.
And when we're doing that, or the staff is doing that, are we also doing an inventory, an evaluation of the equipment?
Yes, and that is another part of not only the checkout procedure with instruments that go out that are loaned to students with parent approval, and also the parents sign a responsibility form for that instrument. We evaluate the condition of the instrument, and then at a certain point when we're doing inventory on whether it's the off year when the directors are doing it and signed by the principals, or whether we're doing it. We also seek input on whether we need to continue to carry that instrument over if it's just, at a certain point, repair cost exceeds replacement value. And so that's another layer that we look at too, to make sure that we're not continually pouring money into repairing instruments that actually should just be replaced or are obsolete and we don't use anymore. Okay.
Very good. That's good news.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, one of the things we noticed just in 2020 was people had their own Excel spreadsheets. They weren't even using the charm system, which it was called. So that's the kind of thing when internal audit comes in and we can identify that, we say, all right, here is now going to be your process. You will use, you know, the software, and yeah, it's made all the difference in the world. So I think that's it. 24, 25, rest. So right now we're doing the hiring and retention audit. And so you can see we're looking at recruitment, branding, onboarding, attrition, compliance, and performance metrics. And we have Weaver helping us with that. We've got some subject matter experts. And we're just taking a deep dive, and it's something that's critically important to the district. We want to hire the best, and we want to keep them. So every year now, we're going to have an IT audit. And last year was our cyber security risk assessment. We've done like IT general controls. This year we have a lot of apps throughout CISD, and so this will be an audit to what are the security and the controls around those apps. Again, we've got the same partner that's been working with us for 4 years and knows CISD, knows the people in IT. That kicks off the first or second week of February. And you can see, you know, we're going to be looking at, just make sure we have an accurate inventory of all the apps that we use. So that's going to be a big one. And again, the HR and this one will be reported at the May. The results will be reported at the May Audit Committee meeting.
How long do your audits typically take? I mean, do you give yourself a month per audit, or I'm just curious?
Give myself, by the time we do the kickoff meeting to the time the final report's about 6 weeks, depending on the size of the audit. The bigger IT audits, like the IT general controls audit that we did a few years back, took a couple months. Now, when I do a follow-up, it may take 3 weeks. We'll be doing Chromebook inventory, so I'll go out and we'll do a sample of a high school and a junior high in each of the feeder zones, and just make sure that their Chromebook inventories are accurate. What kind of process are they using to keep track of those, and just kind of look at the overall controls around that, as well as doing the actual inventory.
When was the last time a Chromebook audit was done?
No, none that I know
So
of.
this will be the first of its kind. All right, good to hear.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the last one. I was
Sure.
waiting to not interrupt, and then I missed it. Did you say that this year we're looking at, last year it was cybersecurity?
Last year was a cybersecurity risk assessment, right?
Risk assessment. And then this year you said we're looking at inventorying of apps that we use?
Yeah, so it's the app security and controls.
Okay,
So,
app security.
yeah. And we have Dr. Lambert here to answer specific questions about this. Come up and just kind of give a...
Yeah, I don't know how specific I can be. We haven't had the kickoff meeting yet, but generally speaking, what I understand we're looking at is primarily our business systems, but all of our applications that we use, so all of our software, getting an understanding of what we have, what inventory systems we have in place, and then again, mainly or primarily for the business systems, the controls that we have in place for who has access and how they get access to it, which again is a follow-up to the IT general controls that looked at business systems, but other things as well.
Dr. Knoll, that was one of the things, I'm not sure if it's in the same process, but that was one of the things I'd asked you about was applications, softwares, subscriptions that we're using. Will we evaluate how many of them we're really using enough to justify the value of, are they value adding to us, and make that adjustment in the, or evaluation in this assessment, or is it something that's separate?
I don't know if that's part of this
Okay.
assessment, but it is something that we're actively doing. We have a software called Learn Platform, which we're implementing now that is helping us and also helping us to have conversations with campuses about what software we're using, how much it's actually being used, so that people can make better decisions about what to spend money on and what not to, and also to see where we have overlap. Are we using, are we purchasing multiple pieces of software to do essentially the same thing? Because at least one of my priorities is to make it easier for people to function, for teachers to have fewer high quality tools rather than 17 tools that do the same thing that everybody then has to learn a different one.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I think that within any process, I'm not talking Conroe ISD specifically, but I think in all organizations, even in our homes, we forget what subscriptions and what we're paying for and what's, where we're overlapping. And I'm really glad to hear that, because no matter how great we are as a district at trying to do that, unless we actually inventory that and evaluate it, then sometimes things that can add up to a lot slip through. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And one advantage, and we need this process because we do. The one advantage we have professionally over my own family budget is, the family budget, it's easy to join something and it just charges your credit card every year. That doesn't happen here. Every year, every item gets a PO, has to be approved. So it doesn't mean that it gets that it can't get a deeper dive, but at least we don't have like recurring things that just
Automatic.
will show up later and we go, oh, we didn't know we were going to keep doing that. So that's a good part. But
Yes, and that is very good, Dr. Knoll, because, but triggering that, hey, has anyone really followed up and checked on this? We know this is a value, but is it of value enough, and are we doing the same thing with two different products? So
agreed.
That's why I'm really glad.
We learn things all the time. And with 70-something campus, sometimes we learn things at one campus and we don't learn it at another campus. And we need somebody to help the other campus learn, right? So it may be that, I don't want to use any proper name, but, math program over here, that's great, but it costs, $10,000 a year. But we've learned at another campus that they're using a math program that's $2,000 a year, and it's really great too. But the campus that's spending 10, they're happy with what they have, but they're spending 10. They didn't even know that the one that costs 2 exists. How do we communicate with them? Like, hey, there is another option here, and it may be, that's the piece I know that Jared is working on, that we are trying to, not part of the audit, but it's the effort that is happening in his department.
And especially with all the updates that happen to software.
Constantly.
And so something could get an update that then coordinates, is now double. We've got it on 2 different things that we could eliminate one. So thank you very much, because that's been one of mine for about the last year that I keep bugging Dr. Knoll on and asking about. So thank you.
We will be looking at usage. Is that what I heard?
Not
as part of this?
I don't believe it's part of the audit, but it is something we're actively working on in our department and in network systems as well.
Yeah, I'd like to get a list of all the apps if you have that.
We don't currently have it, but that is something that we're absolutely working on.
Okay.
So once we have it.
Absolutely.
Once we have it, yes.
Thank you, because that is what I've been asking for.
Will the communication system that we just approved, will that fix some of this? Or no? On the communication side?
Maybe. I wouldn't think it's going to significantly change it. I think part of it is Jared's effort here to pull everything in. People always have the greatest of intentions, but we have to help to streamline, 'cause sometimes you'll get a place where PTO is like, we want to buy this program, and they buy a program for the school and donate it, and then something else, so we may have 10 different math programs out there, and part of what we want to always make certain is whatever's purchased goes through the proper vetting process, one, for content, and then two, for security. We want to make sure that whatever software program we're using follows all the laws associated with student privacy and all that. So it is about trying to get everybody onto that same page. We need to do it. That's why he's working on it. It needs to happen.
That's another thing you just said that I'm happy to hear about, because we did find there was a gap or a loophole in one of the apps that was being used in 6th grade, where outside people could see these kids participating in something and see where they were, and we shut that down, and I thank you on that, because that is critical, so.
With that in mind, I do want to touch on that. With that in mind, that is, what you're saying is that's part of this audit process, is we are looking and reviewing at the safety and security of these apps.
It is not part of this process. This is a separate deal, just Jared's work that he's doing in his department. It won't be part of this audit. This audit is kind of a separate deal. It's more of an internal systems of who has access to some of our systems that could get to our finances and those type of things. This is not a student level app audit necessarily, but Jared is working on that in his department. Instructional technology department is currently working on that and bringing it all together right now. Jared works with Dr. Upshaw, so we kind of have the C&I team and the instructional technology team. They're one, but they're working together to put that list together. So yeah, we'll share it with you when we have it.
So that will be, what I'm understanding is that will be more a part of the process of selection.
It's just and it's just an internal continuous improvement model. It's not an audit necessarily process.
But it's being addressed.
It's being worked on.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this audit that we're gonna do is more kind of focused around the security
IT.
and controls around. Because what we don't want is an app that's out at a school to be a backdoor for a bad player.
Was
So
that a finding from the cybersecurity audit that you did last year?
it's
That
part
this
of
was a
that,
weakness
and it's
potentially?
part of the IT general controls audit that we did. But again, we can only do, so much each year, so what we're trying to do is kind of establish that baseline, and we've really done an effective job at that, of saying, here are the areas that we probably need to focus more on, here are the areas that we're.
And perhaps maybe you can go back and send the new audit committee that report.
Absolutely.
I just don't
That
want to
would
talk
be
about it
great.
publicly. That was a closed session
Understandable.
conversation, so we can send it to you all,
Yeah.
but I just want to
Yeah.
keep it,
Understand?
yeah.
So, and then next year, again, we'll have the risk assessment. Y'all can put in your ideas, but we'll always have an IT audit. We will have a new head of network services, so that's probably something that it's going to rank that a little higher in the risk assessment. And then last, do construction audit. So what I do is I kind of wait till around March and see what construction project is closest to completion. And then we go in and really do a deep dive on all the financials, change orders, and are we, retaining correctly, and are the payments to the CMAR correct? And are we just really kind of tick and tie all those numbers? And this is a almost pure financial audit.
Could I go back and ask a quick question about Chromebook inventory?
Okay.
I noticed that we were super successful with our band protocols and getting those instruments back. Would it be possible to implement the same protocols for our Chromebook inventory so that we can track our Chromebooks really well?
Well, I need to see what those protocols around Chromebooks are right now, because I don't know. And that's going to be part of this audit, is to identify what tracking mechanisms are we using, how well are those controls working, and then once we kind of have that information, make a determination from there on what process would work best. And again, working with management, because you don't want to recommend something that's so onerous that people won't do it. and it's just not cost effective. So,
And sometimes the things that we learn out of these too are that we need to provide the resources to our staff to do what we're asking. Like, one of the things that helped in the band world is that the software it improved, right? In the transportation world, we probably need to update their software so that it works better. I think we're gonna learn a little bit of the same thing perhaps in this audit. There are just times that we need to provide a resource to help that, but to Brian's point, I think we need to wait and see the results, but we know there's room, there's a reason it's on the list, there's room there for improvement, that's why we need to do it, so.
Thank you.
any other questions for me?
Anyone?
Thank you so much.
So I will send you the risk assessment and prior IT audits. And anything else?
I think
Oh,
that-
and the schedule for the audits that,
I think it'd be useful if you would just, if you go back to last year, send all the department audits.
Yeah.
Not all the campus ones, but the department, I don't remember what other departments we did, but just send all of those just because it helps everybody get up to
Okay.
speed.
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. We're done. We're actually just one more item. Item number 6 on the agenda is to confirm the next scheduled meeting is on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at 7:30 a.m. Is that good with you, or do y'all have another recommended schedule?
I'm looking at the ones with children to get off to school, so that's why I was.
I
Are you
just
good
make
with
my
that?
husband take them, it's fine.
Okay,
Good with it?
Yeah, I should be okay.
okay, great.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second?
Second.
All right, we are meeting adjourned. Thank you.